Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now today we're going to take a look at restoring two vintage Star Wars Landspeeders. On the right I have the Kenner larger version which fits the 3 3/4 inch size figures, and this suffers with quite a few problems that are pretty common across every version of this that you'll find. That is, the windscreen is missing, the seats are missing, and also the landing gear mechanism doesn't work. So we're going to try and fix all of those. And then we have the smaller version. This is the Diecast version, and I picked this up at a toy fair recently, and this is pretty much always missing the cockpit glass, so we're going to make a replacement glass for that as well. So let's get straight on and we'll take apart this larger version and see what is wrong with the landing gear and whether it can be fixed. So here we have the Kenner Landspeeder, and this is one of two different versions that you could get. One with the opening front section, which you can see here, and then there was the toy-polloi issue in the UK where that had a solid sort of piece of plastic over it and you couldn't open it. This one has been very kindly donated by Kevin Mitchell. It looks like he's stripped some parts from it for other projects, which is why he sent it to me, because he thought it would be a good thing for me to fix. So the thing we first want to look at is this landing gear. You can see here there's a little mechanism. You're supposed to be able to move that backwards and that locks the landing gear in place, and it feels like something has broken off that little peg there, and there's also some springs missing, but until I open it up I won't know what's there. So I'm going to get a little pot in here to hold the screws. I've got a Phillips screwdriver here, and there's just 4 screws to undo on the bottom of this. Nice simple construction. That means that we can get straight inside and see what's going on. There's the screws out. Now the little front section has a latch on it, and that always falls out when you take these apart, so just be careful to keep a note of that and don't lose it. So just prise everything apart. It's not glued in any way, this toy. You just have to sort of go round and put a fingernail between all the sections. As you can see, it will then just pop apart like so. And there you go, that's the bit I was meaning. This is the little latch that holds the front panel down, so don't lose that. I'm going to put that in my little pot. But there's the top section. That has nothing that needs fixing on it. And here is the bottom section, which is where the broken parts are. Now you've got 2 silver side panels. These can be removed because you don't need those at the moment. And then here is the internal working. So what's happened here is we've lost a spring. There should be 4 springs, 1 at the back, or either side at the back, and 2 at the front. So there's 1 of those missing. And then this is the little latch mechanism that pushes this whole section up. So it should raise up and go down. And there's an arm that you can see has snapped off there. So we're going to have to work out a way to replace that little arm, because that is what is used to raise and lower the landing gear. So I don't actually know how long that arm needs to be. Luckily I have another Landspeeder, and I'm going to take that apart so that we can take a look at this little device and see exactly what it is we need to make. I've quickly just taken apart my other Landspeeder, which is fully complete. And as you can see here, this is the little peg that is broken. What happens is when you move the gear stick back, it pushes up the whole of the landing gear. As you can see, there's quite a long sort of post sticking out of the gear stick. So I'm going to take this out of here, and then we can have a better look at it, and we'll work out how we can make a replacement version of it. Should be able to just lift that up and pull the little gear lever out without taking the rest of this toy apart. There we go. So here is the gear stick, and it's this post that we are missing. So let's take this one out of the broken Landspeeder and we can have a better look at it. So you can see we are missing the entire length of that post, and I think we should be able to make something that will work, even if it's just a screw or something we put in there just to give it the correct length. But I'm going to have a quick look in my sort of parts box and see what I can find and see what I think will work nicely for that. Well, if you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I like to use bits of Lego because it's a nice easy plastic to work with, and it's also something that other people can easily source. So today again we're going to use a bit of Lego. I've got this Lego antenna here. This is a black antenna. You can buy these very cheaply, and I think this will do the job. It's not quite as thick as the original post, but it's certainly long enough. So what I'm going to have to do is sort of cut a groove of some kind into here so that we can insert a section of this Lego aerial and then glue that in place, and hopefully that will still give it enough strength, because this has actually got quite a lot of sort of pressure put on it, but I think it will work. So let's just give that a go. I'm going to start modifying this and just see what I can make. Well, as you can see, I'm pretty pleased with what I've been able to make there. What I did was I took a Lego antenna and I cut the end off, and I've just sort of filed that down so it's a little bit flatter rather than having the sort of rounded profile that it normally has. And then into the broken part of the gear stick, I've used my Dremel just to cut a small groove which matches the size of the new bit that I've sort of shaped the antenna piece to, and that will just fit in there. And the reason I've done that is because obviously when you pull this lever, there's quite a lot of force goes onto this, and I want something that's going to be nice and sturdy. Now normally I would just glue this in place just using some super glue, but this time I'm going to use something different. I'm going to be using some of this, which is plastic weld. Now the plastic that these old Kenner toys are made of works very well with this plastic weld, and so does Lego. It basically melts the plastic a bit and sort of bonds it back together, so you end up with a join that's almost as good as though it was sort of new bits of plastic joined together, and much stronger than the super glue that I would use. So we're going to use this. Now the way this works is you sort of drop a bit on, so I can put these two pieces in place like that. We'll get some of this plastic weld. I'm going to just tip a little bit out into the lid, and then you need a paintbrush or something, because you just sort of dab it onto the area and the capillary action sort of pulls it all in, and it will slowly melt the plastic. And because this is all hidden, I'm not too worried about how neat this looks, but it should work really well. So just dab that on, and you sort of leave it to evaporate, and it will melt the plastic, and you'll see the plastic does end up getting quite sort of sticky looking. And then once this all evaporates, you'll end up with a really solid join that hopefully nothing will be able to break. And then this landing gear will work again. So just dab that on, and I'll let that dry, and in the meantime we can sort out the missing spring. So as I showed you earlier, this landing gear is missing one of the springs. There are 4 springs that sort of enable the mechanism to go up and down, and this one here on the front left is missing. Now sometimes you can get lucky on eBay and buy bulk lots or lots of a broken vehicle, and I just happened to do that. I bought this bag of a broken Landspeeder, and it's the other version of the Landspeeder with the solid front that I was mentioning, but as you can see it's missing the top middle engine. So really there's not a lot you can do to repair this because that whole piece was missing. But what it did come with was all the parts for it. So I've got the springs. Now sometimes obviously you don't have the springs, so you can just use a piece of elastic. You make a loop of elastic and tie it around, and that will do the job. Or if you go online or somewhere like eBay and search for springs, quite often you can find springs that are pretty similar to these. Now they're fairly sort of weak springs, but there are lots of places that sell things that are just about the same. So you'll want a spring that when it's compressed is about what's that, about 1.2 centimeters long, and has a sort of a fairly good stretch to it. But really elastic will do the job as well. So, but in this instance I'm going to use an original one just because I happen to manage to buy one. But keep looking on eBay, because lots of it like this sort of come up from time to time, and you can get lucky. I think I paid for this whole Landspeeder 99p, and the reason I bought it was because it had the windshield, but there are other useful parts in there. So now putting that spring back, this mechanism works how it should do. And now that we've done all of this, the plastic weld will have had time to go off. So let's refit the little gear stick here and see if that mechanism works as well. This has now had plenty of time to dry. I actually put an extra little bit of support on one side. This is just another bit of plastic just to give it just an extra bit of strength, because I was a little bit worried it might be too weak. I think it should be okay though. We've now got to put the whole vehicle back together to test it. So for the moment I've removed all the springs just to make it easier to get everything back in the right place. You just sort of have to drop everything in and then put the 4 springs back on the corners. But if you've taken this apart, you'll remember exactly where they all go. It's a fairly straightforward process, if a bit fiddly, just to make sure that they all hook onto the correct little tabs. There's one. There's the next one. And then the front two are actually slightly easier just because there's more space. And we will get this whole vehicle back in one piece, because you can't really sort of pull this lever up because it's held in place by a part that's on the top section. If we get the top section of Landspeeder, you can see these two little marks here actually hold that in place. So we'll put everything back together and just check it works. So again, I'm going to grab this is the little front tab that I told you to keep sort of check of, so you don't lose it, because that has to go in place there. We get the 2 sides of the Landspeeder, the silver pieces. Now these sort of hook either side there, and then we can flip this over and drop that through. And you have to sort of line up the gear stick, make sure it goes through the larger hole on this side, and then you can sort of move everything around. And I'm just going to quickly put a couple of screws in, and then we can turn it over just to check that the mechanism actually works. We can now test this mechanism. So you can see this is with the gear stick in the forward position. You have the spring-loaded wheels, and if I move this into the back position, it pulls the landing gear up, and this now sits flat on the floor. So you can see that actually works pretty nicely. It's a good sturdy fix. I think that's going to last quite well. So we can now move on to the next bit, which is the missing seats. Now for the seat, I was hoping to find an original, and while I was at a toy fair recently, I found the 1990s version of a Landspeeder, and I was thinking about taking the seat out of that because it's pretty much the same sort of sculpt. There's a little bit more detailing on these seats, and they're also made out of grey plastic, but with a bit of paint that would have worked. But in the meantime, very kindly, John Van Horn sent me in some original seats. Now these aren't particularly hard to find. These ones are actually a little bit melted. You can see they've sort of bent and bowed a little bit, but they will still do the job just fine. And these are held in with some tiny little tabs here. You can see there's little sort of posts sticking out, and they often snap off. You can see one snapped off this side. So I'm going to actually sort of stick this other side in with some double-sided sticky pads. You can pick these up pretty cheaply. These are sort of foam sticky pads, and you just have to cut a few and stick them on top of each other. And you can see it will make a sort of neat sort of pile of sticky tape, and I'm hoping that one I have glued, it may not hold, but I think with the sticky tape that will hold everything in place. So I'm going to just take the tape off that one and very carefully slide this in. You can see there's 2 little latches on the bottom. You slide those under that and it clips over this section, which is why these are always broken. But I think with some careful tinkering, and then I can just push that down. I'm hoping that's going to stick enough. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So those seats will hold in place. If I ever find some better seats, I can swap them out, but I think for the moment that will do the job. So we've got the seats in place. Now we can move on to the windscreen. We're going to use the same technique for making the windscreen on both of these, so that's why I brought in the die-cast version as well. And I was lucky enough actually to get a windscreen for the large-scale Landspeeder. This came with that broken Landspeeder I bought for 99p. It's not the most sort of perfect of the windscreens. You can see it's got a crack there and a little bit of a scratch, but it's great because it means I can either put this on so I can have an original one on this Landspeeder, or I can use it as a template to make a replacement one. So you see that's what the original windscreen would look like. and we're going to have to make something similar for this small one. Now I have been sort of thinking about what I was going to do, and I was thinking about using a water bottle or something like that, or a drinks bottle, so I could this 2-litre bottle of Coke, because the plastic would be roughly the right shape. But I need to say a big thank you to Alexander Gross, who suggested something that I hadn't thought about, and so I've bought it, and that is Christmas baubles. Now you can buy these for making your own Christmas baubles, and they come in various sizes. So I bought this one is an 8cm bauble, and this one is a 4cm bauble. So, and they come in 2 parts. You can split them apart like this, and you can do the same to the little one. So I'll just show you exactly how big they are. If we put them on my measuring mat, you can see that one is 4cm, and this one here, if I line it up at the end, is 8cm. And these are going to be perfect for what I want to do, because we're going to cut these down and make something that matches that shape. But first we've got to work out how to copy that shape onto here and then cut it. And for the smaller one, I'm just going to make something up because I don't have one to work with. But as you can see, 4cm should fit quite nicely. So let's get cutting and marking on these and see what we can make. For marking up the larger one, I'm going to use this as a guide, and I have a tape measure here because we need to make some measurements. So I want to measure how deep this windscreen is, and it's just slightly over 4cm, and also how much around we need to go. Again, this is just going to be a rough guide because it's going to be pretty hard to cut this. So that's got to go round just slightly over 12cm. So what I'm going to do is get a marker pen and just sort of roughly mark. We can use the cutting mat as our guide here. I'm going to mark some little marks on here just with a marker pen. So that's the start of the back of the windscreen. I think that's going to be the bit nearest the pilots. So I'm going to roughly mark on here just slightly over 4cm down. And then how far around did I say? I've already forgotten. Just slightly over 12. So we need to go around about slightly over 6. And I'm going to mark just about there for 6. And I will do the same on this side. Mark there roughly for 6. Now these are just rough markings because it's going to be pretty hard to actually get this all to line up, and I may sort of come back to this and do a few goes of it, but what I've got is some tape, because this is going to be the easiest way to draw lines over a surface, is just to grab some tape and I can stick it. So these are my 2 sort of front markers, so I'm going to stick the tape on the left hand one and just try and roll this over the top of the dome and see if I can get it to line up on the other side. So you can see roughly what I'm doing is just trying to work out the shape of the dome. I think that's not too bad. If I hold this up, which way around am I going to be working? I think it's going to aim up about like that. So that's not actually a bad guess. Just sort of do it by eye and see what you can do. But I think that should line up quite nicely. Now I've got to cut this. Now this plastic is very brittle. If you try and cut it with a knife, it will just shatter. So I'm actually going to cut this with a Dremel, with a cutting tool, and just work my way very slowly around the edge until I've cut it neatly. The plastic is liable to sort of melt a bit because the Dremel will run pretty hot, but I still think we'll be able to cut all the way around. So I'm going to cut that neatly and see what we can do. But I thought in the meantime I'm also going to work out this one. Now this one I'm just going to do by eye because I have no idea how big this needs to be, so I will just mark something up and cut it by eye. And I think that's all you can do, just sort of guess where it's going to go. But I hope I can do the same on this one. So let's mark this one up as well, and then I'll get cutting. Here's my Dremel with a cutting disc attached to it, and I'm going to use this just to very carefully go around and see if I can cut this without cracking it. So really the only way to do it is to have a go. So let's get started. I'm going to switch this on and we'll see what happens. As you can see, that actually cuts quite nicely. I'm just picking off some of the little burrs and bits of plastic on the edge. I reckon if we take off this brown tape, you can see I've actually got quite a nice cut line there. It's just going to need a little bit of sort of fine tuning with some fine sandpaper. I'm just going to carefully rub those edges down. I think that will work quite nicely. Yeah, that's not looking bad. So let's have a look at the small one as well. You can see all the little bits of plastic where it melts. It's just because the plastic gets very hot with that cutting disc on. And there we also have a very small one. So just going to sand these down quickly, get them looking a little bit neater on the edges, and then we can do a test fit and see what they look like, and also work out how to make some little brackets so that these can clip in place. I've now sanded down the edges and just sort of smoothed them off, and also cleaned off the little bits of marker pen just using some lighter fluid. So here are the two pieces I made, and we can just drop those on, see how well they're going to fit. And you can see they're not looking too bad at all. They're really quite a good size and a good shape. I think that's the large Landspeeder one. Let me just bring in the original just so we can compare. That's a really quite a close fit. All we've got to do now is work out how we can attach them. So we're going to make some little brackets that clip into the holes. They've got the same sort of fittings on both, so if we can get one to work, we'll get the other one to work. And I think we're going to use the same plastic. I'm going to cut some tabs and then glue them in place using the plastic weld. I think that should work quite nicely. So let's cut some tabs that we can attach to the edges of these, and then see how well it fits into the vehicle. So this is the other side of the bauble that we haven't used. I'm going to use this to make some tabs. I'm just going to cut along this line where I cut the first section off using the Dremel, and I'll make some little sort of tabs that we can glue in place. So I'm just going to get cutting, and we'll see what we can make. So I've made 4 little bits of plastic like this, and I want to plastic weld those on to the top part of the dome at the sort of same positions where you can see these 2 holes are on the top of this Landspeeder. So if I put this in place, you can see it's about 1 centimetre in those little tabs need to go, and I reckon we can just plastic weld those on. So let's just give it a go. I've got the plastic weld here. I'm going to pour a little bit into the lid and then start to put these in place. I'm going to sort of find one that sort of matches the same sort of shape and get some of plastic weld, paint it onto the edge so that it starts to melt a bit, and I can hold this in. I said about 1 centimetre in. So just hold that on, let it start to set. Now you do have to be a bit careful with this plastic weld on the clear plastic, because it does mark it and you'll get a little white sort of mark, but we can very carefully just brush along the edge here, and that will be enough using capillary action to soak in and glue this in place. I'll do the same on the inside, being very careful not to get any on the main part of the cockpit glass. And just leave this for a few hours and it will go off. So we can do the same on the other side. So I'm going to line up the tab, make sure I got one that sort of fits nicely. Like so, and we'll try and get it in the same sort of position as the other side. So again, use the plastic weld to sort of start to melt the edge of the plastic. And you can see there I've made a mistake. I've now got the plastic weld on the clear plastic and it's marked it. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I will have to start this one again if I want to get rid of that staining. You do have to be very, very careful with it, because it melts the plastic so quickly, and you can see how badly it stains it, or just melts it. So that's a bit of a shame. I can do another one, but you can see that does work otherwise. Just have to be very, very careful. And I'm going to do exactly the same for the smaller cockpit. I've just got to bring in the small die cast one, and again we can just sort of line this up, work out where we need to put the tabs, and again it's about 1/2 centimetre in this time, so I'll make sure I get these small tabs just about in the right place, and then we can put the plastic weld on. And I'm still going to try and be incredibly careful because I don't want to make the same mistake on this cockpit. I'll be extra careful with this one. Looks good. Line up the next piece. There. I've now given everything time to dry, and you can see here this is the finished cockpit glass. This is the one with a little bit of a mistake here, so I've made another one, and guess what, I did the same thing and made a little bit of an error there with the glue, but it doesn't really matter because I'm pretty happy with how these have come out, and sometimes a little error on them doesn't make that much difference. So let's try and fit this one to the Landspeeder. So you can see the 2 tabs go in the 2 holes, and it should hold in place quite nicely. There you go. That actually looks pretty reasonable, so I'm really pleased with how well that looks. If we sort of compare it to the original glass, which is a little bit yellowed, you can see that's a remarkably good sort of recreation, considering it's just made out of a Christmas bauble. And let's have a look at the smaller die-cast one. Again, this is the one that I made, so this is not looking too bad. You can just slot those little tabs in the holes. And again, there we go, that looks really nice. It seems to fit quite well. It's not going to fall out. So obviously you can still take it out if you ever find an original one, but that looks pretty good. I'm really pleased with how well that fits. Again, I've made a second one of those just to try it, because I thought it might be a little bit higher, because I don't have an original one to sort of compare to. That looks a little bit high, so I've made a slightly smaller one. If you just take that one out, here's the smaller one. It's slightly lower sort of to the ground, but again, if you have that on a Landspeeder, they're going to get all the air in their faces, so I'm not quite sure which one I prefer. I think I might stick with the first one that I made. But as you can see, when you buy these, you can get a lot of baubles for not much money, so you might as well try and make a few as you go along. I'm really pleased with how well that looks. And that's it for this video. We've now got 2 of the major sort of areas that were broken on this Landspeeder fixed. The landing gear now works and is nice and spring loaded, or if we lock that in the back position, it sits flush to the floor, so that all works again. And of course we have the replacement cockpit glass, which is probably the most interesting thing I think people are going to get out of this video, because that is the bit that's always missing. And again, we have the same on the little die-cast Landspeeder here. The replacement cockpit glass is looking rather smart on that. I will come back to this restoration, because I know a lot of people have missing stickers for the Landspeeder, and I'm going to recreate those, but I'll do that in a separate video, because again, a lot of people have been asking me how I go about recreating these stickers, so I think this is a good set of stickers to show you that on. So there will be a full video on how I go about recreating these stickers for a toy like this, so make sure you subscribe and check out all of my future videos, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.